What do we think about these? Obviously, we're getting the light subclasses reworked, but obviously, notably, there is the absence of a new element or subclass, which most of us were expecting. Some kind of thorn, corruption, poison, green element. I don't think they even. I don't think technically promised there would be a new one with each subclass, but it does. It did seem like Bungie intended to add the poison greeny element with Witch Queen, but obviously now they're not. So that was probably one of the only things missing as far as like things that we kind of assumed would have been in the expansion, and obviously would have been a very good thing to have. A whole new element is obviously very good, as much as stasis is very controversial. We were definitely expecting it, but it seems we're getting instead, and it probably makes sense with them adding the final shape for them to just give more time to work on those subclasses so that maybe we don't get the same problems as stasis. And in the meantime, we're going to get the light subclasses reworked, starting with Void. And then, so you would imagine we'd get the new elements with Lightfall and the final shape. But what do you think about the lack of a new subclass / element?
I think, honestly, considering exactly what you just said, where Lightfall and Final Shape might have Darkness subclasses, I feel like this makes all the sense in the world. I imagine the story justification is also going to be the Lucent Hive that we've killed have shown us that we can use the light in new, terrible ways. Should we use this power? I suppose we don't have a choice, you know? And it's going to be the justification for it. So it makes perfect sense from a narrative standpoint that this is what they do. Also, I mean, it was going to happen at some point that we, you know, reworked all the light subclasses. Yeah. And I feel like this is as good a point as any.
It wouldn't make sense to double up.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're sitting here with the ability to update the entirety of the game and breathe life into some subclasses that have... I don't want to say the subclass trees have been a problem since Destiny 2 Vanilla, because especially with Forsaken and especially with Armor 2.0 and all the mods that we had added, and the way that you can actually competently craft a build nowadays, it's nowhere near as... Yeah, it's nowhere near as bad as it used to be in D2 Vanilla. But there's still that slight looming shadow over all of it where you basically have to sit there and say, hey, this still isn't quite perfect, you know? This still feels somewhat limited in comparison to Stasis, which is just customizable to a point of extremes.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think if you're really looking into all of this, you know, you can kind of sit here and you should really expect that, yeah, that was going to happen. And again, if you have 2 seasons which are very likely to rotate around the darkness as a theme in its core, then it only makes sense that in 2 years and 3 years from now, we will be wielding darkness subclasses, you know? That's going to be, I think, the way that everything goes.
Yeah, I think especially coming from, what you're saying about the light subclasses being a little bit just seeming a bit antiquated, especially, I don't know if antiquated is the word, just... not customizable, not very player intuitive. It doesn't give much choice, especially coming from Destiny 1, where of course you could customize subclasses. You could literally pick and choose perks, what you want. You could adjust things. And then when into Destiny 2, I never ever really understood the cluster system of the light subclass. It always seemed very strange, just because the way they give you 4 perks, it's kind of like, what's the point in showing the perks if you can't choose? It's kind of like just like here are your 4 perks, but it's like I can't choose them, so you might as well just give me these perks. Like it kind of gives you the illusion as if you can choose and customize, but it's like no, you just pick this cluster or this cluster. So it just never really made much sense. And especially, you know, seeing the darkness, the stasis subclass, the full customization of that, it definitely makes the light subclasses seem very antiquated, because it's just like, here's your cluster of 4 perks, which most of the time only about 2 or 3 of them you actually use. The other one is just kind of there. If you had a choice, you would probably pick and choose and customize. And there's always one from one cluster that you wish you could have, and the other one from the other. So it's just, and especially with the like Night Stalker, for example, there was always options for like smoke bomb grenades and like invisibility duration, which you wish you could have the perk from that tree added with that tree. But it's just, it always just seems strange, the fact they give you these 4 perks, but you can't change or customize. It was kind of like, there's not really much point in showing me these because I don't have a choice. It's just I have to take them whatever you say, so there's not really much point displaying them as if there is a choice. So I think the overhaul is going to be much needed for those.
I don't know about you, but what irked me was way back when we played the Destiny 2 beta. They had the system by which the subclasses were just a wee bit different, and you could only ever play the one Warlock one at that particular point in time, which was... actually, no, I was thinking of the ones at Gamescom, where we played Dawnblade. Right. And the thing that irks me is for that brief moment at Gamescom, I was able to experience Destiny 2 with a Dawnblade subclass that had the movement ability of both bottom and top tree, where I could do Phoenix Dive and Icarus Dash. And I'm sitting here now playing Destiny 2, and it has still always, to this day, irked me that I cannot use both. And it's one of those things of, if we're going to see all of these aspects and fragments get added, and if we're going to see real perk choices get brought into Destiny 2, I would love to see things like that get added into the customization, you know? I would happily trade off a perk or so on bottom tree Dawnblade if I could switch it out for a perk on top tree. You know, I'd very happily switch up the melees on my different trees so that I could work all of that stuff in. I'd happily go ahead and sacrifice Dawnblade stuff if I was looking to do that specifically, so that I could go ahead and make a core melee focused build, you know? And have something where it's like, hey, I can have the like ranged spaghetti melee, but I can also make dudes explode with it, like on bottom tree, you know? Or maybe give myself a damage buff instead, like on middle tree, you know? Like, choice is always a good thing, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's kind of what it goes down to.
It'll obviously not as good as a whole new subclass, but it definitely will freshen things up a bit to be able to, because if they do it similar to how Stasis set up, it would, you know, let you. It would be almost like I don't say new subclasses, but it would be the biggest refresh in terms of all of those that we've ever seen, in terms of being able to have a perk that you've always wanted. Now you can add it, and now you can have this aspect, and also, of course, there'll be fragments and other, hopefully, new things that makes things change in other ways. I don't feel sorry for the balancing team. I'm sure they're going to have a lot more work because, again, all the variables and possibilities when you do that open way up. So in terms of things that can break and things that can have bad interactions are going to go way up. But as the player, you know, we're not concerned with that. The player, all we want is choice and the ability to play how we want. So it's it will be good. Obviously disappointing to not get a whole new element, but it also would seem a bit like, you know, the thought of getting a new, even though Witch King is delayed, getting a new element and subclass every year, that did seem like a lot. So again, not glad it's delayed by any means, but you know, it is what it is. We'll hopefully the next two expansions will have dark, but you would imagine, obviously we know they're going to add more, but it's just in the meantime we'll just focus on the life
matter of time. Also, I think the last thing to touch on this is, I hope that they've heard the community backlash about removing supers. You know, because it's one of these things of, when they rework the subclasses, they have a choice to get rid of things like Nova Warp and to collapse, you know, Solar Warlock, for example, into either Well of Radiance or Dawnblade, or Solar Titan into Big Hammer or Little Hammer. You know, like it's very much about, you know, some classes will have the same identity with this kind of stuff, and maybe they could expand it. Like, imagine Arc Hunter having Arc Blade come back and having that perform differently from Arc Staff. You know, those are changes that you could make. But there's core identities in lots of Destiny's subclass trees now that people really, really home in on. Especially with the supers. Like, I don't know about you, but for me, there's an exotic that I've always stuck with ever since it's released, and that's been Phoenix Protocol, because it's just that good. And it also classifies the exact kind of player I want to be. And, you know, to top it off, it all looks great. And that all revolves around Well of Radiance existing, you know? And it's kind of this very troubling point of, if this no longer exists, what am I going to do? You know, you kind of kill a lot of players' core fantasies if you get rid of some supers. And doing so is very dangerous. It's dangerous in fact, I'd say it's more dangerous than sunsetting. Because guns were getting changed out all the time, but subclasses are part of the core class identity, you know? Like, they got to touch that one with the deftest of hands and make sure nothing feels...
It sounded complex and messy when they alluded to it, and, you know, they got a lot of pushback, rightfully so, because it definitely was like well, hang on, like, you're going to be getting rid of stuff, like, you're going to get rid of Nova Warp, or like, what are you going to get rid of? These things. And also you got to think, like, the exotics that are designed for those, what's going to happen to those. Like, it's a very, like I say with Destiny, it's a very, very messy, complex game. But yeah, getting rid of things like that, it would feel like almost sunsetting subclasses at that point, pretty much.
Absolutely, yeah. And yeah, not a popular move whatsoever.